I just recently watched the Chernobyl miniseries, which is excellent. I highly recommend it. They all had British accents in the show, which was weird to me. But once I got over that, thoroughly enjoyed it. And there's full frontal male nudity if you're into that sort of thing. But the show did a really great job at illustrating just how bad the USSR's official response was. Now, the people who were actually on the ground fixing the problem, incredibly brave. But the Chernobyl disaster only occurred because the USSR had a long history of covering up problems rather than addressing them and fixing them in an attempt to save face. Kind of like North Korea, the Soviet state could do no wrong. So if something ever did go wrong, that got classified and redacted rather than addressed and fixed. Because to fix something, you have to admit that something was wrong to begin with, and if you're telling your people and the world that you're perfect, you can't be wrong ever. And they are willing to do that even at the expense of countless lives. That behavior and culture literally caused every single problem every step of the way in the Chernobyl disaster. From covering up known design flaws in the reactor and building it that way anyway, to moving forward with a flawed safety test that actually initiated the Chernobyl disaster, which is ironic that a safety test caused the biggest nuclear disaster in world history, to continuously lying about the extent of the disaster to the people actually working on trying to solve the problem, and to neighboring countries, and to the people who lived in the areas. Everything about the disaster was preventable. All the people and animals who lost their lives or had their lives uprooted did so needlessly, and it only happened because their government is so hellbent on being perceived as perfect that anything else is considered an embarrassment. And that reminded me of something that happened a little bit more recently, 25 years ago. In August of 2000, a Russian nuclear submarine called the Kursk was going out to do an armed training mission. In the process of arming it, a torpedo was dropped from a crane. And, you know, mistakes happen, it sucks, but at this point, normal people would be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't put this torpedo we just dropped from a crane in a pop can that's gonna have 120 people in it underneath the ocean. That's not what they did, because if they did that, they would have had to explain to their higher-ups that they made a mistake, of which there would probably be retribution. There would be retribution because admitting that you made a mistake would mean the Russians aren't perfect, and that shit's embarrassing, apparently. So they load the torpedo on the sub goes out and does its training mission, and while it's out there swimming around doing submarine shit, the torpedo blew the fuck up. Turns out leaking fuel is bad enough in normal situations, but it's even worse when you're like Sebastian the Crab, you know, under the sea. Blew the nose off the submarine, and the submarine sank more than what it was trying to do on purpose. But modern military subs are compartmentalized and designed to protect the crew. It's why when a US Navy sub crashed into an underwater mountain, which is a ridiculous headline, it got all fuckered up and a few people got some injuries, but everybody survived. So while Russian subs, like the rest of Russian equipment, sucks a lot more than our stuff, and the sub, after having the nose blown off of it, couldn't get itself back to the surface, the majority of the crew still survived. They just needed to be retrieved from the bottom of the ocean, which is problematic because, you know, there's only so much air down there. It's also hard to see shit, and there's pressure. There's just lots of complications. Now, Norway knew there's a problem almost instantly because they have seismographs there, and they heard it blow up. And Putin, like his favorite puppet today, was on vacation and couldn't be bothered addressing the disaster. But you know, there was no disaster because they're Russian and they're perfect and everything was under control. First, they wouldn't admit that it happened at all, and then when they couldn't deny that anymore, they admitted it happened, but they had located the sub, they had air hoses hooked up to it, everything was fine, rescue was underway. Then because, you know, there's satellites and planes and shit, and we could see them, and we could tell that that wasn't true either, then they said they knew where it was, but they were just having some trouble actually getting the stuff hooked up to it to conduct the rescue mission. At this point, like a bunch of countries, like Norway and France and shit, they're like, hey, let us help you. Like, let us use our resources. We have some of the best divers in the world. Let's get them in the water. Let's help you rescue your crew members. And Putin, while lying to the world and his people, refused the help for 5 days. Had that not happened, could the approximately 80 of the 118 crew members who survived the blast been saved? Maybe, maybe not. We'll never know. But what we do know is that almost 100 men with family and friends and lives slowly suffocated to death in a cold, dark tube on the bottom of the ocean. All because a completely preventable accident occurred and Russia refused to acknowledge that it had even happened until it was way too late. And to make matters worse, one of their admirals tried blaming it on NATO with absolutely no proof, but that is what they allowed their people to believe. And Putin called the wives and mothers of the families who were looking for justice whores who were hired for $10 to discredit him. And the lawyer who represented them, Boris Konetsov, something Russian, he had to flee the country after representing them for fear of persecution. You may be asking, what's the point behind me bringing up this 25-year-old tragedy today? And the answer is that over those past 25 years, some fucking morons have apparently forgotten who the fuck Putin is and what the fuck Russia does. So next time somebody comes out here and starts spewing Russian propaganda about the war in Ukraine and how it was Ukraine's fault or they were denazifying Ukraine, or anything that puts Putin and Russia in any sort of favorable light when it comes to international foreign policy or their unprovoked invasion of a sovereign nation, remind those imbeciles that Putin's only priority is looking strong and not being embarrassed on the world stage, and to achieve that end, he was willing to lie to the entire world and allow 118 of his soldiers, of men serving his country, to suffocate and freeze to death on the bottom of the ocean, and then called their loved ones who were grieving and looking for answers whores in the aftermath. And after something like that, only the most brainwashed idiots on the planet would ever believe anything that comes out of Putin or the Kremlin's mouths. And if he was willing to lie about something that small, how big of a lie do you think that they're willing to tell about the most embarrassing military operation in Russian history? Putin, a former KGB agent, is not now and never has been a good guy. And Russia is not now and never has been our friends.